So mate, just getting out into the wild.
Yeah.
Is it just nice just to even just take 5 minutes down the road and...
Just like straight away, as soon as I've got out of the car, put my camera on my shoulder and just coming out into a green space, I can already feel the difference in how it's making me feel. It's quite powerful really, and I don't think enough people do it. You know, wildlife saved me from the darkest point of my life, so now I feel like I owe wildlife something back, so I want to tell everyone how fantastic it is.
I'm Simon Owen, filmmaker, wildlife photographer and proud ambassador for the Lancashire Wildlife Trust. From shooting skate videos in the early 2000s to directing global advertising campaigns for the last 15 years with my production company, I've always been drawn to wild stories. The raw ones, the honest ones. This series is about conservation, mental well-being and the people who find their peace, their passion and their purpose in the wild. This is Wildest Ones.
Welcome to episode 2 of Wildest Ones. If I was to simply sum up today's guest as a wildlife photographer, I'd be doing him a serious injustice. He hosts a podcast called The Wild X with Adam Dukes and Andy Green. He runs wildlife photography trips with Apex Adventures with Adam as well. And he's a huge advocate for all things mental health, conservation and living wild. So he really does epitomise what this series is all about. So let's get to it. I'm very excited to introduce today's wildest one, Mike Phelps. He has an infectious enthusiasm for everything that he does, and I hope you enjoy it. All right.
This is strange. I'm used to being behind the camera and asking the questions, so this is totally different.
Yeah, well, let's get to it. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Make yourself comfortable. What was it that kind of first drew you to the wild?
There was 2 people in my life that got me connected into wildlife. One was my dad. He was a fisherman, so I used to sit on the bank with him from a very young age. I mean, I'm talking 2-3 years old, and fell in love with fishing, but it was more about the sitting on the bank, watching the kingfisher fly past, being out in nature. The other person was my uncle, who lived next door to a wildlife reserve, and straight away he realised that I had a keen interest in wildlife. From around about 5 years old, 6 years old, he was like my ambassador of wildlife. And then one day he invited me to go to see the peregrine falcons, who had just started nesting in Ross-on-Wye. And I remember it as clear as day. We got there and there was nobody there and we had the place to ourselves. And the peregrine left the nest and landed on a rock right beside us. And I suppose for me, that is the first time I got that natural dopamine hit and that excitement of, wow, there's a wild animal that's come quite close to me. And I relate to that to this day when I'm doing wildlife photography. That feeling that I got then, I still feel every day now when I'm behind the camera, and then all of a sudden something comes in that's quite special. And you get that release of dopamine, that excitement, the adrenaline. So this is my primary camera and lens. This is that 400 2.8 I was talking about. It's an insane lens and an amazing flagship model, the Sony A1. This is another Sony A1, and I use this for sort of like secondary filming, or if I need to get a wider angle shots, which has got a 70-200 on. I've also got, for a really wide angle shots, a 16-35mm lens there, which is phenomenal. GoPro, so if it's raining or I'm doing anything near water or going underwater, but that there, the piece of glass on there is unbelievable, and because it goes down to f2.8, you get a real nice separation and soft background, which makes your images look amazing.
Tell me, what does wild mean to you?
It's being able to disconnect from the modern world, the rat race, the 9 to 5, getting rid of all of that out of here and being able to connect with wildlife and nature. And if you can do that, regardless of where you are, that's wild for me.
Tell us a bit about how that journey kind of went from enjoying wildlife, spending time in wildlife, and then into what you do with photography and being a wildlifer.
Yeah. It was quite funny actually, because back then you was a nerd if you loved wildlife, and all my friends wanted to go out and play football, and I didn't want to go and play football with them. I wanted a pair of binoculars and I wanted to go out looking for wildlife. Now that changed quite dramatically. Unfortunately, a number of years ago, my mental health took a dip and I ended up having a breakdown. Off the back of me going through a traumatic experience when I was younger, my parents split up and I watched my dad's mental health decline to the point where he didn't want to be with us anymore, and I had to go through that, unfortunately, because I didn't deal with it at the time and go through counselling. It come back and it hit me hard later on in life. When my mental health started to drop, I literally went into myself and went into my shell. I started to drink because I couldn't sleep of a night, and to get me to sleep I would drink. That would then have that knock-on effect, that horrible effect that you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, your mind's spinning all over the place. I couldn't get back to sleep. I was shaking. Mentally I was in a terrible, terrible place. Then on one particular day, when I'd been drinking, I'd been to the cricket. There's a picture of me stripped down to my boxer shorts. Oh God, it's terrible. These boxer shorts was like in the style of a suit with a dicky bow on, and I've got 27,000 people at the cricket ground doing the Mexican wave, and I'm at the front and everybody's laughing, and somebody took a picture of me, and I said, "These people would think I'm having the best time of my life." I was, oh God. Hang on. What I was trying to say was, that picture where it looks like I'm full of life and having the best time of my life, I was actually at the worst point of my life. 2 or 3 hours after that, I had a breakdown. Everything come pouring out. My wife didn't know what I'd been through, and I just could not stop crying. I mean, it's mad, it was years ago, and even just talking about it now still makes me emotional. I take a positive from every negative, so although that was the worst part of my life, I would never have discovered wildlife photography if it wasn't for that. So whilst I was receiving counselling, my wife said, "Look Mike, you love wildlife, you're always out with binoculars, you bought me a camera that I've never used, why don't you go out and try and document what you're seeing whilst you're out there?" And if I'm honest with you, that was probably the best bit of advice I've ever received. And what that did for me was, whilst I was receiving counselling, I was going out with a camera and taking photos of nature, which was probably more effective than counselling itself. It was the best form of therapy for me, without a shadow of a doubt. I've got friends that play rugby and they're quite happy to, when they've broke their arm or their finger, showing their x-ray and they're at hospital and it's, "Look at me, I've broke my finger." But when you break your mind and you have to go for counselling, I don't think any one of them would be there at the door of a counsellor saying, or a therapist saying, "Oh, my mind's broken, here I am." And for me, it's exactly the same. Sometimes our mind breaks and it needs a bit of help to get back to where it should be. Wildlife definitely was the thing that really brought me back and gave me a spark and brought me back from that really low point to probably the highest point I'm at the moment, where, I'm doing it for a living, which is fantastic. I got my wife kicking me out the door sometimes. She's like, "Your mood's like down here, get out and come back in 2 hours with some images." And then she says, "It's like having a different person in the house." I took that, it snowed all weekend, and then on the Monday it was beautiful. And I had meetings all day and I couldn't go out with my camera in the snow. And then I had 2 meetings cancelled on the bounce. So I grabbed my stuff, I run to a local canal, and when I got there, I got my camera out and these 2 foxes was playing, and I literally got seconds with them and took a burst of images, and this was the one I got. And Chris Packham voted for this as the Protect the Wildlife calendar competition, and this was the front cover in the December. So yeah.
Awesome. He loves his fox, doesn't he?
Yeah, absolutely loves foxes. But they're incredible animals, aren't
they? Do you feel a responsibility to protect these wild places that you visit and photograph?
Yeah, we've definitely got a responsibility to protect them. We've got a duty of care. You know, wildlife saved me from the darkest point of my life. So now I feel like I owe wildlife something back. So I want to tell everyone how fantastic it is. I'm a huge advocate of mental health awareness and what nature does to help you with that. So really, me setting up a podcast, talking about it, telling the stories, doing a YouTube channel to bring it to life and telling that story and making people fall in love with wildlife, then I'm 100% doing what I've set out to do. So tonight we're talking about one of Britain's most loved garden visitors, the hedgehog. According to the research by British Hedgehog Preservation Society and the People's Trust for Endangered Species, hedgehog numbers in rural areas have dropped by as much as 75%. We're very, very lucky because wildlife and nature is free. If you've got something around you that's got a green space in, just go into it. It's scientifically proven now that you get feel-good endorphins, which is a chemicals released by your brain that actually make you feel good. Serotonin is released when you hear birds calling. It automatically releases in your brain, and that is a feel-good chemical. But the biggest bit of advice I could give is sit down, go quiet, and just let wildlife come to you. And it's not about how close you get. It's about how you get there. So if I get into position first and then the wildlife comes to me and I stay tucked away, concealed, and then wait for it to move off, I can get really, really close, but the wildlife's coming to me. And that's a big difference for you chasing it. But I've had people in the past where they're taking pictures of me with a mobile phone saying, you're too close. And I'm saying, but the wildlife approached me, and that's totally different. So I think people need to focus more on how did he get into that position and did the wildlife come to him rather than he's too close.
So what would scare you the most about losing the natural world?
Yeah, I mean, we know that a lot of wildlife's in decline massively. I was talking to somebody the other day. I have tawny owls in my wildlife area, and they said, well, they're our most popular owl. But since 1970, there's been a decline of 30% of them. You know, it does so good. It's so good for our well-being. If it's not there and we can't do that, what's going to happen to everybody's mental health and well-being? You know, it's going to be on the floor, and that's really, really important to me. And next generation, not my kids not being able to see wildlife the way that I see it, that's really frightening, that is. And their children, what's going to happen, you know, to their children? You know, are they only going to see it through wildlife parks and zoos? I want them to enjoy it out in the wild like I do, and that's really frightening.
What does being a wildest one kind of mean to you?
So being a wildest one means that you are immersed in nature. You want to be in nature all the time. All you think about. And don't get me wrong, I don't just think about that. I have a family to think about, but the majority of my time I want to spend out in the wild.
Awesome. Awesome, Mike.
All right, mate.
So good. Let's wrap that up.